We are and always will be a nation of immigrants.
This is my country, my damn country. Give me my country, you can keep the rest.
Bold men and women yearning for freedom and opportunity who leave their homelands and come to a new country to start their lives over.
We were strangers once too.
My country, my damn country. Give me my country.
Hello, aliens and allies. Your friendly Russian is here. This is We the Aliens podcast. I'm your host, Sasha Kapustina. Thank you for tuning in. Today on the podcast, I talked to Yuliya Linhares. She came to the U.S. from St. Petersburg, Russia, over 20 years ago. Yuliya is an oncologist. She graduated from University of Chapel Hill. She did her residency at UCLA, and for years she served blood and marrow transplant program at Cedars-Sinai Center in Los Angeles. And now she's the Chief of the Lymphoma Service at Miami Cancer Institute. Basically, Yuliya is a rock star doctor. And here's my conversation with her. And we have Yuliya Linhares with us on We the Aliens podcast.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So how long have you been in the U.S. now?
It's hard to believe, but it's been 22 years.
And where did you come here from?
I came from St. Petersburg, Russia.
And after all these years, does the U.S. feel like home?
It is my home, but it's also not my home. I have to say that I realized that I don't think I can acquire my home outside of St. Petersburg after many, many years of searching for a home. I lived in North Carolina. I lived in California. Now I'm in Miami. And at each place, I really tried to make my home. And I was looking forward to it becoming my home. And I would say there was a period of time where at each place I felt at home, but then that feeling dissolved. And I realized that it's really okay. It's really okay that I don't have a home outside of my native city, St. Petersburg. So I realized that I have to make maybe a 5 to 7 year plan of where I live, and I'm comfortable with that. And you know what I just realized while talking to you? I realized that I think with my personality, the place becomes my home when I leave it. So when I was in St. Petersburg, before I left it, I was kind of miserable. You know, it was like 98, awful economy, no future. I had to work like 3 jobs. So I left and I was like, oh my gosh, I miss it so much. I miss my home. So now I left LA, but I'm now familiar more with my psyche and like this whole thing. And I was like, well, LA is always going to be my home. And the main thing is because my friends are there. I love my friends. And, my home is also where my friends are.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a huge one.
Yeah.
Anytime I think about leaving Los Angeles, I'm like, I can't do this again.
Yeah.
It took so long. I don't know, maybe it's me, but it took me a long time to find friends. And it takes time to build it. And it's just, I'm terrified of doing that over again.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. When I left Russia, losing my friends was a tragedy. I mean, I had clinical depression for years. I mean, I was, I have to say I was like semi or suicidal. It was horrible. It was awful until I learned how to keep long distance relationships with friends. But I literally talk to my friends in my sleep and I talk to them in my head. I think to the point where I almost acquired some kind of psychic ability. Like I swear to God that like I think about people, I talk to them in my head and then they call me and they're like, oh, this and that. I'm like, yeah, I know, so I think it just, 20 years of living away from people you love just teaches you to feel how they are through the distance.
100%. It's crazy. Wow. So let's back it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to unpack.
Do you remember when Soviet Union fell apart?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was it like?
So I was, as far as I remember, it might be a little bit imprecise, but as far as I remember, I was 12 years old. And actually, it was very exciting because first of all, there were a lot of publications that came out that talked about the crimes of Stalin and, the truth about the violence and revolution and so forth. For example, one of them was Огонек, the little fire. And, because I was a good Soviet child, when I was 12, I was interested in politics and current events, and I loved to read. And I just remember that, my mom had all these magazines, and when after school, I would come to her job and just sit there, and wait for her for several hours so we could go back home together. And I would just read those magazines for hours. And so it was just so exciting to learn about all that history. And the fact that I could discuss it with my mom because it was new for her as well. And then, just also, in the Soviet Union, we had just a couple of magazines, for kids, like Young Naturalist, like Звездочка, the Star, or like some Pravda. And so I remember there were like some other things, like, more trashy things coming out, like, I don't know, like magazines that were like, with nice paper, and they had like recipes, or
Right.
like, love stories, some love accounts, and also there was more sex out there, on TV, and also in all these magazines and newspapers, so that was exciting. So
Interesting.
yeah, and there were a lot of funny things too. I mean, the funny story was when they, I remember like some of the just very plain, like day-to-day, life hallmarks of perestroika were, for example, the fact that suddenly we had shampoos. Before, like we didn't, like in my family, we didn't have money for shampoo because it was like 3 rubles, and my mom made like 100 rubles or something like that. It was
Right.
very expensive. So, well, we were also extra poor, and you only had like 1 or 2 kinds or something. And then, they started to advertise this, American, I presumed American shampoo, Vidal Sassoon. And it had, and it said, oh, shampoo and conditioner in 1 flask. And, we all knew what shampoo was, but the reality is, like, they were advertising it that way. No one in the Soviet Union knew what conditioner was because it just wasn't there. It just like wasn't around. And so I thought that conditioner was some kind of like built-in hair dryer or like some electric device. And like, I remember in the bottle, I kept looking for a conditioner. I'm like, where is it? But it was also so damn expensive. It was like 10 rubles, which was like a lot,
wow.
but it was like a
Yeah.
status symbol. You got the Vidal Sassoon, so, and then like it took me a while to realize that conditioner was something in it, and then I was like thinking, why is that a big deal? So
Yeah.
like
That's
silly,
funny.
silly
Little things.
little things like that.
But, I don't know. I don't know. We're living in this, COVID world. And I remember in the beginning of it, I felt very shaken up. And I thought, oh, probably my parents felt similarly when Soviet Union was falling apart. Maybe because you didn't know what was going to happen next and what was going to, because I don't really remember. I don't really remember it. I was too young. But I was thinking that sense of uncertainty that we're living in right now connected me with their experience. I was like, oh, that's probably how they felt. Do you remember, like,
I think it
picking
was
something like that up?
Yeah, I think it was going in stages, and it also all depends on the personality of your parents, right? So my dad was a very good Soviet person. He loved communism and the fact that he had the designated salary. To this date, he works at the same place he's worked for now for 60 years.
Yeah.
So for him it was a disaster. He back then he was laid off. So he was living on some like handout. I mean, all he had to eat, like literally, he had 3 cups of tea a day with 3 sandwiches. And then later I checked what he was eating, and it turned out that what he thought was like some kind of human spam was like literally he was eating canned dog food, you know? So I actually helped him out. Like, I started to work when I was 14. I started teaching English. So I actually like helped him financially, and he ruined his stomach because like the other thing he could afford was this hydrogenated spread. Like, this also thing was new in Russia, this, margarine, I guess. It's like, that was his food, and he hated it, so for him it was a disaster because his very orderly world in which for him there was enough freedom, he was completely ruined, and because my father he was never interested in money, in having more. He's a very naturally content person, like, he's the kind who had like 2 pairs of underwear and socks and just changed them every day, and it was enough for him, versus my mom is very spirited, and she wants to have a free mind, free speech and everything. And so she was super happy. She's like, even though, and we didn't have anything to lose, like we were so poor. So a lot of people who, when we had this inflation where like one day, we woke up and I was like, oh, yesterday 10 rubles was 10 rubles, you could buy a lot of stuff like for a week. And then we woke up and the next day 10 rubles was 1 loaf of bread, and then in a couple of weeks or months, and again, these are just memories, right? So they may be false and not close to facts, but the way I remember things is that one day 10,000 rubles well, actually, that's close to facts. So 10,000 rubles is now garbage. But so a lot of people, like, they saved money all their lives. And so for 10,000 rubles, you could buy a nice car, And so, like, one day, when it happened within months, like, our very few friends who had it, like, had nothing, because then you could buy a loaf of bread for 10,000 rubles, and it was
Yeah.
all done. But my mom and I, we had nothing. My mom was like, "Oh, that's why you shouldn't have any savings. Only had 10 rubles, and so I had nothing to lose. So I don't really care." You know, Just like all those greedy people, look where they are now. So, so she was just happy with
Here's to spending.
she was just like happy with the freedom of speech. And we're two women. How much do we need? Eat very little overall. And just just like that. And I remember there's some things where like, oh, now you have more variety. Before we had like 4 types of bread, now you have like 20 types of bread. After all, like, how much bread can you eat? How
Yeah.
much can you consume, right? Because back then we still were not exposed to just how much you can have, right?
Right.
So we were still like post-Soviet Union. So it's not like next door to you had people who had villas and, Ferraris and so forth. So you didn't have much, but you also didn't know how much you didn't have.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the most tragic things that happened, and again, I mean, it's a journey, right? So I realized that what happened is we learned to envy, because before the country was closed. And so in a way you were kind of content, like my dad, and a lot of people were content. As a kid, I was like super happy. I mean, I went to Ukraine to see my grandparents twice a year. I never felt miserable. Like, I remember I had shoes with holes, and like Soviet shoes, like you put them on and literally 3 days they would like fall apart. I thought it was fun. I was like, oh my, now my feet are wet. That's fun. But then I remember how, like, throughout the years, like, from kind of being excited and exploring that new situation when I was 12, I went into like real depression when I was 15, 16, 17, because then you're like, oh, now I know how much we don't have, and now I want to have all this stuff. And I come from intelligentsia family, and my parents are engineers, and we can't really take bribes, and we can't go into business because my father despises merchants. He just kupci, merchants, despises them, right? And so here I am, medical student, and tour guide, and English teacher, and I'm going around in my giveaway fur coat that's literally, I still have it, is like 40 years old. It was like from Trophy, Germany. So I'm like, seriously, I still have that coat. Like,
Trophy stuff is such a Russian thing.
Yeah, like freaking trophy coat. And I'm like going around, and I still remember, like, I had this boyfriend. And, so I was like, had this coat, so you couldn't really see that inside the fur was all like spoiled and the buttons were falling off, and you couldn't really repair it because like the skin of the coat was falling apart. And I remember, and he was from a better family, they adapted better, they probably did take bribes, so they had some like better posts. And I remember how he took my coat, and then he saw that, and he's like, what is that? And I was like, I had nothing to say, I had nothing to say. I'm like, I was like freaking Scarlett O'Hara, with her dress out of that, velvet curtain. And like, I was like, I didn't say anything. And then we didn't see each other after that, So,
Really?
yeah. So I really felt like desperate when I was a teenager, because, I felt like there was no opportunity for me. Like, the only way I could have opportunity was to sell myself, was to, either either go into business, because everybody was about business, or marry some rich scumbag, because the only person who was rich would be a scumbag at that time, who would control me, or take bribes as a doctor. I was in the medical school. And so I felt very depressed, because I felt like in that country there was no future for me, because it wasn't compatible with my moral standards, because I do come from a family with moral standards.
Yeah.
And so I had to leave, so I left when I was 20, because I wanted to be an honest person, and I love science and medicine, and I wanted to be able to do those things and at the same time have dignified life. I didn't want anyone to look at my old moth-bitten fur coat, and
judge you.
that,
And judge you for that.
Yeah, and judge me,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I cannot even imagine. It's a completely different world, even though it's a very short, like, I'm not that much younger Like it's just a small difference, like few years, but makes a huge difference in the experience because the country evolved so rapidly. I don't have any of those memories. I mean, we were also pretty poor, and I didn't have any clothes and all of that, but I don't remember like not having food, for example. Although that did happen, I just don't remember it.
Yeah, no, again, like food, I guess like I was never a big eater until, sometime later. So that didn't really bother me. Like it was more like, I remember like during perestroika times when I was like 12, 13,
Yeah.
my mom would send me to a corner store and she'd like, go see if there's anything in the store. And I'm like, okay, and I'd run there. And okay, so there's this store, and because it's still a Soviet store, the salespeople are there, so they're not fired, but they're sitting there with their hands folded in front of completely empty shelves. But they're all there. The meat guy is there, the bread lady is there, the dairy lady is there, but there's nothing. And they're like, is there anything? They're like, nothing. And I remember like there were a couple of things. There was coffee, I guess because it's not popular in Russia. So they had like, for some reason, coffee. And then there was bay leaf. I remember there was always bay leaf, leftover freaking leaf, So, and maybe something edible sometimes, but but I was like, okay, because I didn't really care about eating very much back then, and and we also, so
helps.
they gave out these coupons, for like you get a bottle of vodka per person. I don't know if you remember it or if it's in the story or not, but so again, like back when that happened, right, there was like this year or two of shortages, and so you couldn't buy stuff for money, so you had to have a coupon, right? Because you can only have that much of that particular thing per person per month or per week. So, and everyone in the family would get a coupon for a bottle of vodka, even kids. So it didn't matter, like it wasn't like differentiated by age. So my mom and I would get coupons for 2 bottles of vodka a month, and also like 2 kilos of sugar a month, and like 2 or like whatever, like kilos of flour a month. And neither, and we didn't eat sugar or vodka, and so I remember we exchanged these coupons, with other families who cared for this stuff, for like coupons for something else, or like money, so it was like exchange going on like that. So
Crazy. Yeah, I don't remember any of that, but I've heard about it.
Yeah.
And when I walked into the store, and of course it's nowhere close to that, but when COVID started and I walked into the store, and I think even now, like they still have that thing. I don't know if they have it in Miami, but here in LA at the store, they have like not more than 2 chickens per person.
Oh yeah.
But like, obviously you can come next day or like come back and get 2 more. Nobody cares. But I was like, oh, rationing. Here it starts.
Yeah, or like stupid toilet paper, but for me it was like, I don't know, it's just funny, honestly, it's just stuff. But the fun thing is like the fun stories for you is, like I was saying, like childhood and adolescent experience is always different, right? Because like I guess a lot of the sorrow that you have is taught, and also, but then you also like get more of an opportunity for pure joy for other stuff. So that store that didn't have anything in it was right next to a video salon, which like is a place where you can go and pay a little bit of money and watch videos, watch movies, right? Because in Soviet Union we only had 3 TV channels, right? And my mom and I actually had a very broken old TV, black and white with a little like dial. So my mom and I only had like 1 TV channel. And so even though there was nothing to it in the store, now they had this new business, which was a video salon where you could pay a little cash, it was not much, and then go and like watch like a cool Western movie, a USA
pirated VHS.
So even though the store was empty, whatever, I would go to that video salon, and sometimes you can even sneak in, because if the movie already started and it's dark, you could sneak in and not pay and go in the back, and guess what, sometimes they even showed porn, and so
Miracle.
so I knew the schedule of that salon, and it like that was quite joyful.
Exciting.
So we're like frequenting that video salon quite often. And now you also had like the video channels, so you could like subscribe to one, but also when you had an old Soviet TV, the black and white with a dial, you can actually play with the dial, and it could catch at that channel, and a lot of it was porn. And so there'll be like this black and white, like like all the static like going off and no sound or a little bit sound like German porn going on, and it was like me and my nephew sometimes, like, when parents are away, like trying to catch that, in between all the channels, like that was fun.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Wow. Little joys, huh?
Yeah, so it's like, so what? I didn't get a bottle of vodka or something, like I don't even know what, piece of meat, there was other stuff.
Yeah. But so do you remember, was your mom like worried?
Um, No, like I said, not really. Like my parents are a little bit different, like I would say I wish they actually were a little bit more responsible financial and maybe a little bit worried, but
Mhm.
but like, they're kind of zen, I guess. Like a lot of people were worried, like my friends' parents were worried, and they're like always trying to procure, more meat and more food and like
Mhm.
store it and everything. But with us it was okay. I don't remember it that much, but I mean, I'm sure maybe a lot of things I just didn't know about, because
Mhm.
sometimes it's like, oh, she comes back with like a huge big stick of like sausage. I was like, where did that come from? Now
Mhm.
we're eating sausage all week because we have sausage, or so I'm sure like she did worry and she did do something to get like some
Yeah.
food,
Yeah.
and
Obviously.
I mean, my mom, I don't know how she felt. Like right now, again, I hope she never hears it, but I mean, she clearly has, like tons of anxiety. So back then, I'm sure she
Mm.
probably didn't manifest it, but now she's over 80, and basically, I mean, she is not normal. I mean, she has OCD, she has like terrible anxiety, and I think that yes, absolutely, like maybe back then she was just like doing it, but now, for example, all her house is just filled with plastic bags. She just has this thing about collecting plastic bags because back then and in the Soviet Union, you couldn't get stupid plastic bags. You had to, they were expensive and you had to like save them and wash them. And so now anything she like brings me, she wraps in like 10 plastic bags. And then in more. So it's like an obsession. So they're like all over the place, in containers. Like she saves all the containers from sour cream and milk and everything. So her house is just filled with that to the point where I actually don't go to her house because I just can't be there, because it does give me those flashbacks, because I'm like, I took you out of that where we had to wash the plastic bags and save margarine containers because there was nothing else to store your food in, and so I took her out of that, brought her here, but she can't get over it, and so I don't like visiting her because it gives me a bad feeling, like brings me back to that. But mostly it's like not for me, it's more for her, because I feel her suffering, I feel like her anxiety, and I just don't like it. So
Does she ever, I mean, did you ever talk to her about it?
it's hard to. She says it's normal. She just denies everything, like a typical parent. It's normal to have plastic bags everywhere and dry them and wash them and
Yeah.
store them. So it's okay. My dad does the same thing. So
Yeah.
he also like
Yeah, my grandma does the same thing,
yeah. So
but in Russia, right?
yeah, it's like a Soviet trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so but mostly, I think she just, I think she likes it. Like back when we were in the times of change and perestroika, they also translated all the parliament meetings or whatever it was, like our government body meetings, pretty much 24/7 on TV. And I
Oh,
remember
you mean broadcast? Uh-huh.
yeah, like broadcasted, and she constantly had it on, and I hated it because I was like, I just don't want to listen to these politicians all the time. I guess it was like a Duma gatherings and like them talking. So she loves it, I think
Does she watch C-SPAN now?
now I think she learned how to use computer, but only YouTube, and I think she like pulls up mostly like Ukrainian news and YouTube. So she now 24/7 she again listens and watches all this political stuff, and she just feeds on it. It's like it makes her anxious, and then she calls me to make me anxious, and I'm like, Mom, I left Russia to not be anxious about Russia. Like I'm out of it. Like I don't really like, that's behind, like, because she would literally call me and start like, do you know, in Ukraine right now this, and then in Russia right now this is all going on. And I was like,
Yeah.
don't bring it into my life. Like I care about Russia, but I don't want like have to have that heartache anymore,
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. It is very difficult. I don't have anyone calling me to report the news, but I do have to like tune out sometimes. When I know something's happening, I just tune out of social media not to see it. And then I just go by myself, and then I find the time when I can do it. Like those changes to Constitution that were passed recently, I was just avoiding news about it for a long time. And then about a week before, I sat down and actually read the text of the changes. I didn't read or listen to anyone's analysis or anything like that. I just went to the document and read it for myself to know what's happening. And yeah, that was more anger inducing rather than anxiety for me.
Yeah. And it just, I'm just trying to focus on more productive feelings, and behaviors, because if you're angry or anxious or depressed, you can't really change anything, so I think, I'm just trying to know things, but not really get into this
Emote.
cycle. Yeah, like non-productive, negative emotions that don't really help you make this world better. And, you also understand that some things you can't change, like us being angry or anxious or sad is not going to change what's going on, so the only way we can change things is just basically, I guess, grow your own spiritual body and just do what's right, what you think is right, and kind of learning what's right, because we don't even know what's right, kind of like looking into bigger, universal spiritual paths, I think that's the only way.
Yeah, I am there with you on the path.
Yeah.
So you left in 98 from Russia. It was not Soviet Union anymore. And you by then have graduated high school, or how was life there?
I graduated high school, and I already had almost 4 years of medical university. So I was studying medicine at the Pavlov's University in St. Petersburg. I mean, the economy was just terrible back then. When we started medical university, I think it was 95, 96, something like that. We drank cognac and we smoked I don't remember what we smoked, Marlboro, and it was good, life was good. And, I worked from the very beginning. I started to work when I was, I think, 14. I taught English, I gave private lessons. So I had at least some cash. I wasn't dependent on my parents. And of course I spent it all on smoke and alcohol, and helped my parents out. But then, in 98, I mean, we were down to sharing some freaking Zhigulyovskaya, and sharing some Bilamor, and the worst thing is that, I felt like there was no future for me. I felt like with medicine, the only way for me to get out of my freaking kommunalka where I lived with my mom was to become a corrupt physician, was to take bribes, or become a corrupt physician in one of those private facilities where they have no honor and knowledge. And I just don't have that personality. I wanted to stay an honest person. And I'm also not a business oriented person at all. I love science. I love biology. I love, back then I didn't really love helping people. Now I'm mature enough to say I love helping people. But back then, at least, I had the purity of doing things in an honest way. And I just knew that, at least at that time in Russia, it didn't seem feasible. And we were very poor. So my dad lost his job. He was an engineer. My mom kind of lost her job / retired early. She had, a lot of medical issues. So I basically was working every day. I was teaching English. I worked every weekend. I was a tour guide in the Hermitage and all the St. Petersburg museums. And of course, every night from Friday to Sunday, I partied. So that was my life, and I had to get out. Yeah.
And you had what?
And I had to get out. I had this call that for myself, for my future, for me to develop as a person, the pure person that I am, for me to develop as a scientist, I had to get out of Russia.
And that was your decision?
It was serendipitous, really. And I think it was all predetermined very early on. My mom had breast cancer when I was born, and she was 38. I was a late child. So she thought at the time that she would not live to my maturity. She was pretty much told that she was going to die. So her goal from my very birth was to make me independent so that I could get out of Soviet Union and make a better independent living for myself. So because she lived thinking she was going to die, she really invested everything into my education. So when I was 5, she hired a private tutor for me who taught me English. She was an amazing woman. She was the only one in St. Petersburg, because at that time, no one really taught English to 5-year-olds. I mean, we were like in deep communist times, and my mom wanted to make sure that it was a good teacher with good pronunciation and really good knowledge. So she was an amazing, amazing lady. She used to live in Germany. She had all this porcelain and things from abroad and candy, and she would always greet me in this beautiful dress. She was like a miracle. And because she was like a miracle and she was incredibly kind, I did take to English. I loved coming to her place. She let me drink from those priceless 300-year-old porcelain cups, which was very special. So the whole experience of learning English was just sacred. It was like a sermon. And to get to that lesson, my mom and I had to get across the whole city. It was 1 hour public transport, bus, walk, subway, bus ride. And, I still remember my mom, she was a single mom engineer. So she spent most of her money on these lessons. So she had the shoes that were falling apart. She was limping because her heel was broken on one of the shoes. And she took me to these lessons nevertheless. And I still remember how we would go, through the snow, would go through the rain. Sometimes the car would drive by and just splash us with this huge wave of dirty water. Like, I still remember those places where we always got splashed. And we still went to that English. And like, as we were going, she would always be telling me, she's like, he has, she has, I have. And I'm like, I has, he have. So she really taught me tenacity, and we didn't really complain much, we just did it. And my mom, her vision really came true because then she got me into the school with extra English, which was extremely difficult. She really went to the minister of freaking education of St. Petersburg, and she like cried in his office with me and told him she had cancer and all that stuff. And he let me go into this school with extra English, even though I was like below the age that was required and the classes were full. So she was a real hero. My mom she was so smart. I was going to make English my profession, but she said, Yuliya, you already speak English and you can always speak English. Language is a tool. It's not a profession. It's like, get a profession that's a skill that's unique that no one can have. And I already loved biology and everything. And so I decided that I would go to the medical university. I was able to get into the medical university on my own accord. I did not pay any bribes. Most people paid bribes at that time. It was extraordinarily corrupt. So my mom spent whatever little money she had, probably all of it on my tutors for chemistry and Russian and biology, so that I would just get into the medical university.
So what was it? What drew you to medical?
I had a passion. That's the thing. I was very curious. Like, I love biology. I love it to this day. And it was always kind of like my shining light. It was like I knew that that's what I had to do and explore.
So let's jump to that moment when you first considered leaving. What was that moment? Do you remember?
I remember the process. I think it was the last 2 years of the medical school, where I was realizing that the economy was falling apart, and we lived in this awful, communal apartment. We had no shower or hot water.
Can you describe it for the audience? I mean, I know, but I don't know yours. So,
So communal apartment was a function of Soviet Union. So what happened is that after revolution, there was time when a lot of workers streamed to the cities to get jobs. There were poor people, like former peasants, and they had to have housing. So what they did is they took apartments from former nobility or merchants or rich people and would just divvy them up among the workers. And actually one family would just get a room. So in a 5-room apartment, you can have 5 families living. As a matter of fact, my boyfriend lived in a about 15-room apartment that used to belong to his family before revolution. And they had 15 families. And they had this enormous kitchen. It was crazy, with the ceiling just covered in smoke from like 10 stoves cooking. And it's insane. And they shared one bathroom.
oh my God.
So I was lucky. My communal apartment only had 3 rooms, and our neighbor, completely unrelated person, had 2 rooms, and we had a 1 room, my mom and I. And we shared the kitchen, of course, and we shared a toilet. We did not share a bathtub or a shower because we had none. We also did not have any hot water whatsoever. We just had ice cold water. There's no warming up or filters or anything like that.
That's crazy. No hot water.
Mm-hmm.
Even for a Russian, I'm like shocked.
Yep.
now.
Yeah, that would make you probably pretty determined, and that would probably make you decide at some point to get out of where you are.
For sure. So was there a specific moment or specific situation that forced you to think, that's it, gotta go?
I don't think there was a moment, but I remember how I was walking in St. Petersburg. I take those long, lonely, sad walks in St. Petersburg sometimes, like all St. Petersburg people do, thinking about crime and punishment and life and death. And so I was just walking and looking at the buildings, and I was looking at them, and I was like, I'm looking at them as if I'm saying goodbye. And then I realized I was saying goodbye. And then I realized that I was ready to go, that I was going to go. So even though I had no firm plan and I didn't know how I would go, but I knew that my decision was made and that I was saying my goodbyes. And then for months, I was just saying goodbyes. And then the circumstances came together to where actually I was able to leave the country.
That's amazing that you subconsciously were ready to leave. And then the conscious decision came and the opportune moment came.
Yeah, because separation with the city is very difficult for a person from St. Petersburg. We love our city like a lover. So I remember more saying goodbye to the city than saying goodbye to my friends. With friends, I knew I probably would keep in touch, but leaving that city, I didn't know if I would see it again, or, I probably knew that I would lose that connection. So that was most painful.
Wow. For me, it's always about people. I love Moscow, but it's not like that.
Yeah. St. Petersburg is very special. You're connected to the symmetry of the streets. You're connected to the curves of the arches and the cupolas and to the sky, and it all just being harmonious and sounding like music. I have it in me at all times. That's why I don't think anything can become my home unless it's the whole world.
Wow. You speak so beautifully about your city. It's so cool that you feel so strong about it. It's beautiful. Are you tearing up?
A little bit.
Do you go there?
I didn't go for many years, but now I went 2 years ago, and then I just went this past summer.
Why did it take you so long to go back?
I think that many things here, I had to make a life for myself. I was just very busy, and I also was very poor, so I didn't really have extra cash. I didn't have extra time. And honestly, you're trying to make the place your home, right? So going back would be like going backwards, would be not making this place my home. And I wanted to be happy here. A lot of my friends have this strange life. They live in Europe, but they don't really consider themselves, French or Dutch or whatever. So they have this kind of split weird life where they live in their country. They don't feel like they're citizens. They don't feel like it's their home. They enjoy it halfway. So I'm not like that. I have to say I'm probably as much American as I am Russian. And I enjoy being here. I can't say it's my home, but I enjoy it. I embrace it. So I don't have this split life. So going back was just, at that moment, I think seemed painful. So now when I'm fully formed here, I can go back there as a whole person. So when I went back there, I didn't have that heartache anymore. I guess, it was difficult. I had a hard life in St. Petersburg. So when I went back kind of as a winner, but also a mature winner, not someone gloating. I went back as a whole person. I went back with happiness. Actually, last time I went, what I did is I went to all the old places of my suffering, because in St. Petersburg, I literally had places where I like to go and suffer.
It's so Russian.
Yeah, it's so Russian. There's one bench in St. Peter's and Paul's Cathedral on the Hare Island, Zaychi Ostrov, where I came after school, and I would just sit there, sometimes during the rain, sometimes during the snow, and I would actively suffer and write poetry.
What were you suffering about?
Just so many things. I think a lot of teenagers have this sensation of loneliness. They have the sensation like no one understands them. The future, of course, because I felt like there was no future for me there, and overall the future was pretty murky. I'm also an extremely sensitive person. So just seeing injustice, just seeing what was happening in the country, just seeing, little babushkas, little old women selling things in the subway, seeing street animals, that made me suffer. Everything around made me suffer, or just like that, But I changed, and I made a very conscious effort in the past couple of years to correct my psyche, to also go back and visit myself in my youth. And I did it. I literally went to the places of my former suffering, and I talked to myself. I talked to the 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old myself. And I patted myself on the shoulder and I said, Yulia, everything is going to be okay. You're going to be fine. You don't have to be sad. And you know what? I do not have that burden anymore. That Yulia now knows that the current Yulia is very happy. So, altogether, I just I just have lightness.
Okay, let's back up to 98. So
Yep.
the opportune moment came to go to the US. What was that? What happened?
Again, weird stories, so many stories. So when I was in the medical school, my second year, I was partying too much, just a lot. So my mom was like, that's it, we're going to put brakes on you. And as a doctor, you're going to be dirt poor. So you have to have a second profession. So she signed me up to this tour guide courses with Intourist, this agency for the tourists. So they're official courses. So for a year, believe it or not, I was in a medical school. And then 3 times a week from 6 to 9 or 10 p.m., I went to these classes to become a tour guide. And then every weekend of the year, pretty much, I went to various museums to learn from the curators about the collections.
That's so cool.
Yes, it was super cool. I skipped two weeks, I think, of my medical school completely to study with the curators of the Hermitage, maybe even more. And then I lied that my grandma died. And then the dean was like, so how many grandmas do you have? As far as I remember, a couple already died. I lied about it before for some other absences.
Grandma married a few times, so what?
Yeah. So
all
they
of them.
were pretty lenient. So in any case, they didn't kick me out. So I also acquired a diploma of a professional tour guide for the city and all the museums. And so I started when I was 19. And my very first tourists were a group from North Carolina, students and professors. And I was 19, and I love art. I love it. It's my other passion. I just really invested my heart and soul into them. And, after the Hermitage excursion, I said, you know what, guys, if you really want to see the collections, I'll just take you for free. I'll take you to my favorite ones. Like one of them was Hidden Treasures, for example. So it wasn't part of the official tour. It was the Impressionists. And I did. And then I spent time with them, hang out after the tours, They took me to like McDonald's, and I thought it was like, wow, fantastic. I spent about a week with them. Then I left. It was a funny moment is they asked me, they're like, weren't you scared when you did this for the first time? And I was like, yeah, very scared. Well, guess what? It was my first time with them, and I was freaking scared. And I also made up stories about things with the help of my bus driver. He was like poking me in the ribs and like, this is a story, So in any case, so after they left, in a couple of months, I was sleeping exhausted after my medical school. And then there's this phone call on the stationary phone, and I wake up, run there to the phone. And there's this voice from the United States, and one of the professors who was my tourist, and he's like, we want to invite you over. And do you want to come for the summer? And I was like, yeah, of course, sure. Really want to come. Great, thank you. I hang up, went back to sleep. Then I woke up, and then I asked Mom, I was like, Mom, did someone call from the US and invited me? And she's like, yes, they did. So my mom borrowed money from all her friends because the ticket was like more than she made in 1 year. I went to the embassy, and somehow miraculously they gave a 19-year-old me a visa, which is really, really strange. At that time, they didn't let out any single young females.
They still don't. My cousin didn't come to my wedding because of that.
Yeah, maybe it's because I was in the medical school and I spoke good English. So maybe they thought I wouldn't leave because of the medical school. And maybe they thought if I did leave and stayed in the States, I would be okay. So in any case, I went to Hickory, North Carolina. They were from Hickory, North Carolina, which is like in the middle of nowhere, redneck country next to the mountains. And I was supposed to stay with the professor, but he got sick. He developed diabetes acutely. He was in the hospital. So I ended up staying with one of the students who was also from my tour group. Well, guess what? She was a single mom. She had a 4-year-old brat little son. She was completely broken. So she couldn't even have food. She had no food. And I had $200 for the whole summer. So I felt like I couldn't spend a penny because it was all we had. So I was starving there. I couldn't go anywhere because it's country, it's the South. So without a car, you can't get anywhere whatsoever. And she kept going to some house nearby, which was called, she said was Fred House. At that time, I thought it was like Fred's, like the guy called Fred lives there. Well, little did I know it was Fred House, like fraternity. And I was like, why is she going there? So I went there, I walk in, and they're all smoking pot, eating pizza, and watching Cartoon Channel, which was completely terrifying, because I was like a mature, whatever, I was 19-year-old, and to see adults watching cartoons, you can imagine what kind of quality material that was. While high, which I also never saw high, dumb people, was completely terrifying. So, but at least I had some pizza, so I had something to eat, because all I had at her place, like for weeks, I was just eating old ice cream from the freezer. That's all I had to eat for a couple of weeks. So I had some pizza, and then they gave me some pot from the bong and with some jazz music, and that was beautiful. I did not watch Cartoon Network, though. That I could not cross that barrier. To this day, I'm a little bit traumatized by SpongeBob SquarePants, who lives under the pineapple or something. So anyhow, so you don't know. Good, lucky you.
So you became one of those adults watching the cartoon.
Oh, no. So, and then I met one of her friends, and we fell in love. He kind of rescued me out of that hole. So we traveled around the United States. He seemed like the most beautiful person in the world to me at the time. And then I left, and then he went to Russia. He visited me in Russia. I was already 20. I was in the fourth year of medical school. And then he didn't want to leave without me. So what happened is we were driving back to the airport. He was ready to go back to the States. And my mom told him, again, my mom comes in and she's like, Carrie, do you realize that if you leave now, you may never see her again? And he realized that, and he's like, turn the car around. And like, we turned the car around right in front of the airport, and he stayed, and we got married. And at that time, they gave green cards right away. They gave me a green card, and there you go. I came to the States, back to North Carolina.
Mom knew when to say it so that it hurts.
Yeah, my mom knew all the way. My mom knew everything. She's a very wise woman.
So do you remember when you were actually leaving with your husband at that point to go to North Carolina to live, right? Do you remember that day? You remember leaving?
Yes, I remember very well. It was, again, when you're younger, I guess like the enormity and gravity of the whole situation doesn't really strike you. You're more kind of excited about the adventure. So I got my green card with ease. Back then, they just gave them, when you got married, you just came in with your translated marriage certificate to American Embassy, and they literally just gave you a green card for 2 years, And then I packed up my one suitcase, and I remember my father gave me this gigantic bouquet of beautiful roses. And also I had 2 little green aquatic turtles, and I didn't want to leave them behind. They were very small, like 3.5 inches or so, and so I'm like, I'm going to bring my turtles with me. So I put them in my pockets, each turtle in my 2 coat pockets, and here I was with my suitcase and turtles in my pockets and a huge bouquet of flowers, and I just felt very happy. I mean, I loved my husband at that time, and I was happy and grateful, and my dream to leave Russia was coming true. And I had a feeling that I would have a lot of opportunities. I lost one turtle in my yard. It fell out of my pocket and escaped. But then the other turtle remained in my pocket, and I fed it pizza in London, and it ate. I never knew those little turtles would eat cheese off of pizza. And then somehow I did ended up smuggling it through the border. They never found it. So I brought it in.
What was his name?
Oh, he didn't have a name.
No? How come?
No name.
No name turtle.
Aquatic turtle, and then my huge bouquet of flowers, we entered in Raleigh, I think, North Carolina. It was like the point where they were checking me in as an immigrant, and and you're not supposed to in that little customs declaration. There's a question, do you have any plans? And I said no. And here I'm with my huge bouquet of flowers, like my eyes wide open, like so happy immigrating. And he's looking at me and like my brand new everything. And they're like, you have no plants, and you have those roses. And I was like, these are not plants. You can't plant them. These are roses. These are flowers. My dad gave them to me, and he was completely stricken by this argument. Like, I have to say, he was like, oh,
Oh, that's beautiful.
He looked at me, he looked at the roses, and he's like, oh, okay. Give them to us. Let us examine them. And they like pretended like they examined them for some insects and just gave them back to me. And like, I smuggled my roses as well. So, my entry was already filled with smuggling stuff into the United States, like live animals and roses, and that was very convincing, right?
That's hilarious.
My journey started on a very right foot, I got around the customs, I convinced them,
But you can't plant the roses.
You can't plant the roses. These are flowers.
That's beautiful. That's so good.
So, and since then it was just like that. I mean, I have to say it was just like I had very hard times because, of course, being this immigrant, as I talked about, and being depressed and away from home in different environment. But I was just so lucky that I had just so many wonderful people who helped me on my way. And that I guess I had this like complete, belief into, just everything going my way because I was just so young. I was like unstoppable. I brought in the roses, I brought in the turtle. And then, like everybody was telling me, oh, it takes like years to get into medical school, and, don't even dream about it. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm almost a doctor. And I got into freaking med school 1.5 years after I crossed the border. I was accepted into the United States medical school, because I was just like, there is no other way, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah. You have to have that. You have to have
Yeah.
that feeling.
Yeah, like no fear of
I think America rides on it.
yeah, like no fear of failing.
And that's what I love about it.
So I lived in a trailer. I wore overalls. I gained about 20 pounds. I got a job at the Belk Better Sportswear store. So I was a salesperson. I enrolled in that same very Lenoir college where my professors and students were from. And they were fantastic. They didn't give me any trouble. They were so kind. They gave me financial aid. I absolutely had no money. So they gave me full loans and a little bit of scholarships. Again, I was studying very hard. I was working 3 jobs, ended up working as a vet assistant, just cleaning cages and like holding down animals, washing floors. I worked as a census taker, driving my old car, old Lincoln in the, depth of the United States South, people with Confederate flags. And I would go take census from them with a long form and I would knock and like, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm from Russia. They're like, the government is sending a Russian to get information from the United States citizen, so so that was odd looking back. I don't know how I wasn't raped or kidnapped or anything. There were a lot of really creepy, weird guys in those trailers where I went. So, so that was fun. And I finished college. I studied really hard. I finished college in 2 years instead of 4. Because I took double of all the classes and I took double classes in summer sessions because I really didn't want to be in college. I wanted to be in the medical school. Everybody told me, oh, don't, yeah, my medical school counted for nothing because at that time, back in 98, 99, there was no such thing as bachelor's degree in Russia. So all my 4 years out of 6 of medical school counted for absolutely nothing. And they did convert the diploma and they transferred credits to Lenoir College, but they didn't go towards any degree whatsoever because, for example, anatomy is not a college credit. Physiology is not a college credit. It just doesn't exist. So I actually had to take like biology 101, English 101, like all this stuff I could teach. And I actually also taught, like I became a lab assistant and a tutor for chemistry and for biology. So, so I had to do all that stuff. And also in order to get into medical school, you actually have to have those credits, the most basic credits in the American institution. So like you had to have English 101 credit from American college, biology 101. So all this stuff. So I took all that and I took much more, loving art. Like I just actually enjoyed that opportunity. So I took a ton of like extracurricular art. I mean, not extracurricular, but all the electives were art. Like I did sculpture and pottery and figure drawing and, art history. I actually really enjoyed like this liberal art stuff. It was a small Lutheran college. So I actually had a religion class and I loved it, history. And I learned how to be an American. So everybody says, do you regret like you lost all this time? And I'm like, well, I didn't lose time. I was 18 to 20, and so I was just a little bit older than other kids who got into medical school. I had this college experience. So I knew what college was about. I lived with American people. So people in the South love to talk. They just love to talk, like I guess the same way I'm talking now. And so I learned how to be a listener. And it's very important for a physician to be a listener. It's important to relate to people even when you are irritated or bored. It's important to be respectful. It's important to understand American accent. It's important to understand people from various regions of the United States. For example, in North Carolina, mountain people from Appalachia are very hard to understand. So I learned all that. Then after less than a year of being in the United States, I took MCAT, so Medical Colleges Admission Test. And believe it or not, I did really well.
I do believe it. Why would I not believe it?
It was my very first standardized test. I mean, I didn't even take a practice test. It was the first multiple choice test I took in my life. And all I just took like physics books, chemistry books, whatever books. And I had no money for like Kaplan prep or anything. So I just sat with books and failure was not an option. So I just studied and I did it. And so I'm very grateful to all my amazing teachers that I had back in the Soviet Union and during my whole life who taught me how to study. I had good scores. I got interviews, and UNC Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, was kind enough to take me. They had misgivings. For example, at the interviews, they were really probing because they don't want to take students who would fail. They even offered for me to do a summer program prior to med school, so I would have no trouble in med school, which of course I rejected, saying, are you kidding? I'm going to do great, which I did. I graduated in the top, I think, 10 or 5 of my class. So I graduated with distinction from my medical school. There was one Russian kid above me, in the class above me, and then me, and he also was one of the top 5 students of his class. So after 2 of us, they never really had misgivings about Russian kids anymore. So the student here after me was fantastic. She also was like top 10 or 5 of her class. So we established a very good reputation.
So how was your husband's family reacting to you?
Everybody was very nice, and they all loved me. They were great. I think actually now looking back, I'm more critical of myself because, I was always like saying, but in Russia, and now looking back, of course, now I would never do that, but back then, I mean, I was brand new and I was only 20 years old. And like, I remember, for example, that when we had our first Christmas together, I didn't want to wrap any presents because I thought it was stupid, because in Russia we never wrapped presents. And I thought it was like really wasteful to buy all that wrapper and to tear it and throw it away. And out of principle, I was like, I'm not wrapping any presents. And I remember that they were, a little bit not hugely upset, but I remember like Carrie's mom said, but you're in the United States now. And I remember that back then I was kind of upset, but now looking back, I'm like, that's true. You got to assimilate, or for example, also for Christmas, like the first Christmas, I was like, everything is green and red. I'm like, that's just so cliche. It's just like everything the same. And on purpose, I got like pink and blue stuff, because I was like, I thought it was really stupid to decorate with like that. Everybody decorates with the same stuff, and now I'm just fine with, plastic candy canes and, like, I'm not trying to like, establish my independence on like being different in my Christmas decorations. But, back then it was like silly stuff like that, so I think like I was more like resisting to assimilation. So I was curious, but I was resistant. And I actually am thinking that they could have been meaner to me, they could have been not as nice. But I think considering just how, rebellious I was, I think they were pretty nice. So
Well, what did they think about him getting a Russian wife? Like, was there any judgment there? Did you feel any
I think
weirdness?
No, not at all, actually. Like, I lived in a real countryside and, in a trailer with him. So actually the person closest to us was his landlady, who lived on the same piece of land. So she owned a nice farmhouse on that land and we lived in her trailer. And she was super sweet and charged us so little for rent. And like, she told me like all about her family. Like every day I would come out because for a couple of like months I didn't, I wasn't working and, I didn't have time. And she would talk to me for hours about her family and like farming and, like her cats. And she she grew all these vegetables and fruit and she canned, and I would just spend hours in her house, so it was really wonderful. I mean, she was a very simple country woman, a teacher, but just her love to me was beautiful. And I'm still in touch with her. It's been over 20 years now. So,
Wow.
majority of people, I would say, were more fascinated by me, rather than critical of me. And they all tried to somehow help and embrace. And, so I still felt lonely because some customs were different for me. And,
Right.
some of them were pretty significant. But I think in general it was okay. Like I think one of the other like things that were tough for me was the fact that in the South almost everyone goes to church. And so people kept inviting me to go to the church services. And in the South, it's mostly Southern Baptist, it's Lutheran, Presbyterian. So there's some forms of Protestant religion. And I am not a very religious person, and I actually really dislike mass events and gatherings. Like I'm more of a like not a part of the group type of person. And so I really tried very hard to go to church, and every time I just hated it. I just couldn't, stand up, sit down with everyone. I would get a headache, and like singing. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe people would get up at 8 a.m. and drag themselves to church on Sunday, so, and
I hear
my
you.
husband's mom, so they were very religious, Southern Baptist, extremely religious. And so, she invited me one day to her mega church, and I went, and then I'm looking, and I'm like, the pastor is really obese, and all his family. And I actually read the Bible. I'm like, and I was like, I just couldn't believe, like, again, that these are such religious people. But I'm like, isn't that a mortal sin, like gluttony? I asked her, I was like, isn't gluttony a mortal sin? I was like, I don't get something here. You guys are so religious and you want to observe. And I'm like, I'm just not seeing it, So I just felt like there was a lot of, what do you call it? Like, maybe insincerity, like yeah,
Disconnect.
disconnect, from like going to church and actually like the way of life. I didn't feel like people actually practiced the spiritual or religious way of life. That I felt like they went to church, but it didn't have much to do with way of life.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it. So it was like a part of my torment. And of course I like tried, I went to a religious college. I went to a Lutheran college, and
Mhm.
actually religion was my favorite subject. We had a great professor who was also a pastor. Like, actually liked his sermons, and I went to his services several times. He was very smart.
Mhm.
So I liked it from like a point of view of philosophy and history,
Yeah.
but I just also, like, that was part of the reason why I couldn't stay in the South, because I just could never be a part of that, religious community.
Hmm. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense to me.
So when you say, you became an American, what was it? First of all, did you want to become an American when you got here?
I think I did. I was very young and I was very excited about everything. When you're that young, you don't really reject. So the rejection started later. Well, no. Okay. Initially, of course, I rejected. I mean, I came here, all I had were high heels and mini skirts. And then I was like parading like that in college and like everywhere, and people looking at me. And like it took me maybe 6 to 7 months to buy sneakers, because I never went anywhere without high heels. And I remember I bought the sneakers. So they were too large because I was very poor. So I had the one pair that was on sale. So I was like a Mickey Mouse in this oversized sneakers. And I bought a pair of jeans, like blue jeans, and some like sweatshirt. And I put that on and I went like that. It was so embarrassing, and I went like that to my college. And then I realized that I was like finally blending in, because before then, I mean, in North Carolina, the kids, they didn't even talk to me. No one even talked to me. I was so lonely. Like, they totally did not accept me at all.
Kids didn't talk to you. Hold on. You were there with your husband, right?
No, yeah, I mean, he wasn't a college student, so he was not a student at that college. So, he was just, he was a laborer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was just by myself, like a Russian girl, and I was totally out of my element, and I was completely alienated, because, as you can tell, I'm a very friendly person, and I always had a lot of friends. And those kids, they just wouldn't talk to me at all. And I think I also, like, I didn't understand the humor. I didn't understand the values. I couldn't watch Cartoon Network. I didn't understand sports. I didn't care about sports either. So what happened is, with time at that college, I found international students, so I became friends with international students, and also found art students. And art students were great, so I actually made friends with American art students, and with some of them I became very close. That's where I was blending in. So I guess I was Americanizing. So I gained weight, I got all this clothing that was loose. I started to understand jokes. I guess maybe I acquired a Southern accent. So it was a process.
But when did the depression kick in?
So I would say probably the end of the first year, when I started to feel like, I thought I would just come and then I would be friends with everyone. I thought that Black people and white people would be friends and would be together. And then I realized there was absolutely segregation, and that was weird. And then I realized that, I was kind of segregated, and people look at me like I was strange. So I was just very lonely.
How did you feel that? What made you feel that way?
I mean, I would say, like, even after the class, people wouldn't talk to me. They wouldn't invite me to the parties. They wouldn't invite me to anything. So it was like I was some weirdo, I guess. And it was just very strange to me. I didn't understand why. Now I understand it's because they come from a very small place. And I also understand, I think it's just a thing in the United States. Like, even my 15-year-old son just changed schools, and he was experiencing this for like almost 6 months. He's like, I'm not a part of a group. I don't have friends. I don't remember having such problems in Russia. I don't remember, like, when I joined my medical school, almost immediately I found a couple of people I could talk to, and I was fine. So I never felt like so alienated from people. But in the States, it was definitely an issue. And then, of course, I met some Russian people, but then you realize that you can't be real friends just because you're Russian. I mean, you are a little bit, but also, maybe you don't have too much in common. So I had some Russian friends, but again, they weren't really like soul friends.
Yeah. It took me longer to find Russian friends than to find friends. Like,
Yeah.
not every Russian's going to be my friend.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because you realize that, I actually grew up in a pocket of society where we're all similar. So I thought the whole world was like that. And then it turned out, no, the whole world was not like that. And the whole world didn't care for Japanese poetry, and didn't care for Impressionists, and didn't care for classical music, and, didn't care for, science, and didn't really care. Didn't care for a lot of things that I cared about. So,
What is your favorite Japanese poetry?
I love Issa.
Me too. And Busan.
So, yes, yeah, so climb Mount Fuji snail, but slowly, or even a flea bite on a young girl is beautiful.
That's so cool.
So then I divorced my first husband because of Japanese poetry. So
Really?
yeah, he laughed at haiku. So after a lot of realization of a lot of misunderstandings, I think the last drop was him kind of laughing about haiku and like saying how it was stupid. There were stupid poems. So I was like, that's it. Packed up my little box and left. So
That's so cool. Because I think, as silly as that sounds, I think it's a very defining thing.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta respect it. May say, no, I don't understand it. You may say, well, maybe not at this stage of my life, but you don't like laugh and, say it's like stupid. So,
Yeah, you don't belittle something that someone you love loves.
yeah, yeah. Or at least respect. I don't even need love, just respect.
That's so badass. And so how old were you at that point?
It seems like centuries passed, but I was only 21.
So you packed and moved out of the trailer and went where?
So I was already, so what happened is that I got into med school. We moved from the trailer from like Hickory, we moved to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We actually bought a place because, at the time you could buy a place for $15,000, with like $500 down payment. But the thing is, what happened is my husband was very controlling, extremely controlling. So he didn't want to teach me how to drive. Even though I had 3 jobs, he wanted all the money to be put on his account, and then I had to be accountable for every little thing. He didn't let me go anywhere by myself. And basically those were the issues, beyond the Japanese poetry, and he wasn't willing to work them out. So, then I realized he's just a Southern guy from the Southern family, and that's how it was. First I thought that I was a terrible person, and then I realized that no, that was the culture, and that I could never be a part of that culture. So I had to go because, of course, I was fiercely independent, and I was never, I was never accountable for my money or anything to anyone. So in the medical school, they give you student loans. So they gave me student loans for the whole year. And I went and I opened my own bank account. He didn't let me open my own bank account. So I walked to the bank, opened the bank account, packed up my little box, found a little room with roommates, and just left. So there I was on my own.
That must have been scary.
No, actually, it was much scarier to live with him for the rest of my life. The idea of that was scary. I was set. I had my student loans, and I had myself, and it was great. The only thing is I was extremely lonely. Like I said, I was depressed. I started out depressed from St. Petersburg, and I continued to have like this background of clinical depression. So I was just extremely lonely all by myself in my little room, and again, medical school, new environment. I was very lucky to make wonderful friends pretty quickly, a very small group, but very special group, people who did love poetry. But still, even with them, it was just lonely for most.
Right. So, and where were your parents at that time?
So they were in Russia. So for all my time in the medical school, all I ate was rice and beans, pretty much just straight. Not even salsa. I couldn't afford that, or I felt like I couldn't. I dressed in secondhand. Sometimes I had pasta. Plain pasta with like most plainest sauce, or I think I just bought a can of tomatoes or something. And so I actually saved money, and I sent money to my parents and to the rest of my family from my student loans. And I had my mom visit me like once a year, so I paid for her to visit. I also saved up a little bit of money, and I went to France, to Paris. It was tremendous.
Just by yourself?
By myself, yeah. But I had a friend there. So a friend I already made in Chapel Hill, a French guy. He moved back to France. So I stayed with him and his family there, but I was just by myself. I went around all the museums and exhibitions by myself.
That's so cool. Traveling by yourself is really different kind of experience.
Yeah.
So okay, a little bit back to your depressive state. So in those moments when you were in your little room eating beans and rice, did you think, fuck it, I'll just go home?
Oh, never. I was never going to go back home to Russia. I felt like it. The vision that I had was me just walking out of my place there in the States and just walking nonstop until I reached St. Petersburg. So I frequently just close my eyes, or just like step out and just start walking and just imagine I'm just going to walk endlessly until I'm home. But I didn't know that it was just not an option, because first of all, I already took all my documents from the medical school there, so I couldn't come back to the medical school, and my profession was life defining for me. So I had to continue in the United States. I had to make it.
Wow. Now I'm tearing up. That's intense. that must have contributed to feeling the pressure too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But also I love what I do. I love medicine. I actually loved medical school. So when I was studying, I was happy. Cell biology, biochemistry, it was awesome. So when I was studying, I was fine. It was mostly when I was not studying, but knowing myself, as knowing me, of course, very quickly, I found a new hobby, salsa dancing. So I went out at least 3 times a week until like 2 a.m. while in the medical school.
This is crazy. That's how I pulled myself through my last depressive dip. I started dancing salsa 2 years ago.
Yep. Yeah. So you see, we have a lot of similarities. That's why, I'm not sure whether we have a lot of independent choice. It must be in the DNA, right? So the DNA was guiding me to that salsa and hot Latin guys, and I did a bachata competition, and I was like semi-professional, so that was a lot of fun.
So you made friends then.
Oh yeah, yes. Well, but they were like Latin guys. I mean, they were all what? Were they liars, cheaters? Latin guys. They were my temporary lovers. So, but I also always loved Spanish. So what happened is that in the medical school, very quickly, I realized that it was extremely important for a physician to know Spanish, because sometimes on some rotations, I had 90% of Spanish-speaking only patients. And then I had the salsa connection and all these Latin guys. So I put together money from my student loans, and I went to Guatemala. So I think it was after the first year, I went to Guatemala for the whole summer. And so I studied in the Cedars-Sinai, a wonderful school of Spanish language, 5 hours a day, one-on-one with a teacher. And so in 8 weeks, I learned Spanish. And then week 9, I traveled around Guatemala. Now I'm older and I'm like, how could I do it? Like, how did I not get raped, killed, or kidnapped? I don't know. But back then, like by myself, 21 or something years old with a backpack and on crazy chicken buses in the middle of some gangster land, like I was robbed at the gunpoint on the volcano. I thought that was fun, so, so
What?
yeah. It's just in Guatemala. It's a funny story because so we're having this Spanish school tourist group excursion to climb the volcano, and I didn't even have a Lonely Planet book because that was too expensive for me. So I had some Lonely Planet knockoff book from the thrift store,
Yeah.
and so I'm reading about this volcano in my book, and it says in the book, sometimes armed robberies happen on volcanoes in Guatemala. I'm like, okay, and so I'm like, okay, I'm not bringing much cash, I'm not bringing anything expensive, maybe not even my camera. So I was like, okay, so we went with the group, and I was totally prepared for an armed robbery, and it happened, so I was not a bit surprised or,
Okay, note to self: read Lonely Planet knockoff book.
Yeah, like other people like that were more well off, like they're like some like older people, they didn't read the book, and they had like their passports and a lot of cash, and
I'm sure.
and they didn't hide it, and so they had their stuff taken away. They were all upset, and I'm like, guys, you didn't read the book, But
That's a great tip, traveling tip.
yeah.
That's hilarious.
So when I came back to the States, I could talk to my Latin guys. They were flabbergasted. And also I signed up as a volunteer at our free clinic to interpret and help our Spanish-speaking patients. Since that time, my life also became very closely connected to Latin culture, to Mexican, Central South American patients, and to Spanish language.
Wow. So Los Angeles made sense as the next stop.
Los Angeles, yeah, it made sense. Yeah, absolutely. It made sense. I didn't really know that Los Angeles would have such a huge Mexican population, but it was perfect for me because I was very concerned. It was one of my goals to continue practicing Spanish and help the underserved. And at that time, I acquired passion for those people, not only for their joys, such as salsa dancing, but also I really wanted to alleviate their suffering and be helpful in healthcare. So definitely UCLA residency, all of you hospital, I was able to take care of Spanish-speaking patients and, make them comfortable. So it was beautiful. And now I'm in Miami, so I speak Spanish.
So Miami makes a lot of sense too now.
It's fantastic. So I speak Spanish, I would say 95% of the time with my patients, 95% of the time. They're mostly Cuban. So I have some Venezuelans, I have from Colombia, and we are just jiving, we love each other. It's fantastic. I have a beautiful relationship with those people. I would say quite therapeutic. So all that debauchery was not for nothing.
Yeah, clearly. So, okay. So besides finding friends, what were the tough things early on?
I would say I learned so much. I would say, unfortunately, in Russia, what happened after the Soviet Union opened up, they taught us how to envy, and they taught us to not be happy with what we had. Versus in the Soviet Union, people were kind of zen for most, they're like, at least my dad, who's a very Soviet person, is like, I'm an engineer, I make 100 rubles, and that's cool. That's what I have, that's what I am, no issues.
Well, part of it was that everybody was living the same way. You didn't have much to envy for. Others were the same.
Yeah, so everybody was equal, and so, but then, I think, unfortunately, like, I didn't have very wise people to listen to. And I have to say, I don't think my mom was wise about that, about teaching me to be content with what I had. And maybe that's why I am so successful. I guess how depends how you define success. But I would say that I just really hated that I was so poor, because everybody went back home to their parents. They had a home, they had a house to go to, they had a room, they had place to have their stuff. They went on a ski vacation or to Europe. And there was, like a snail carrying around everything I had, all my earthly possessions, because I had nowhere to put it. So it was just like a little bit depressing, not having a permanent home. That was depressing. And also knowing that I was poor and like still having this Russian trauma, still having this desperation and not knowing what it was to be successful. Like, I'm sure that all other medical students knew very well what it meant to be a doctor in the United States. I didn't, I did not know it would be okay. I was just very concerned about the student debt. And I really envisioned like that I was going to be like that forever. I was just very scared. I had a lot of fear of continuous poverty. So that was unpleasant.
America will do it to you. I mean, for me, and when I came to the States, I was fortunate I got scholarships, so I didn't have any loans to pay off. But I do remember seeing homeless people here in Los Angeles and realizing that the difference between me and them is one mistake.
Yeah.
Car accident or health emergency, and I'm right there.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have health insurance, and just not having health insurance, just not being able to go to the doctor, it's humiliating. And I was clinically depressed. So actually I went once to like a free clinic, or someone took me. I think one of my professors in college realized I was extremely depressed because I started talking to him and then I was crying. And he actually was very kind. So he paid for that visit. He took me to the doctor. And the doctor described an antidepressant for me, which of course I didn't take. After a couple of days, I just stopped taking it because not for me.
Why?
I think it just again, being a stubborn Russian patient is like, I think there's side effects. I can do better without it. I can cope on my own. I was born in 1977, so still have a little bit of this old thinking in me. At least at that time I had it. I remember my mom came to visit once, and with all these amazing things she did for me, I was dressing in secondhand all the time, just to save money to send to her actually, or to save on my education or whatever. And she's like, oh, you look like a bum. Like, why are you dressing in secondhand? And I was very hurt,
Yeah. It's not a thing in Russia. You don't do that.
Yeah, I was very hurt. I still remember it, and I was like, oh, damn, I didn't say anything. I'm like, well, I'm dressing in secondhand to pay for a ticket to come visit me,
Yeah.
But the good thing is, back then in Chapel Hill, I actually lived in a neighboring town, Carborough. I mean, that was completely hippie community, everybody was like a hippie. So it was like dressing in second hand and like not shaving your legs was in vogue. So I was good.
So what were the best things that you acquired or saw or felt in these early years?
Well, definitely friends. So I'm still friends with some wonderful people from the medical school. And some of those friends were life-defining. Like one of the people I met there was a little bit older than everyone, and he went to Peace Corps, and he went to Peace Corps in Paraguay. He taught people how to be beekeepers there to help the economy, and he learned Spanish. And so his desire to help others for the first time made me think truly about other people rather than myself, because to that day, like I said, I had to think about myself. So, I never had this concept of like volunteering, helping the poor, helping others. I was the poor, and so he really inspired me to think about other people and to learn Spanish as well for the medical purposes, to eat better. He taught me healthy eating because, in Russia, like it was just all healthy and organic to start with. And then in the United States, like I said, I gained 20 pounds because of the junk food. I mean, I didn't know about junk food and its dangers and all that bad stuff, so I kind of like learned about healthy eating. So I'm very grateful.
I gained like not 20 pounds, but I think like 10 pounds in the first year I got here too.
Yeah, I mean, when I came here, it's so funny. I mean, I thought it was okay to eat Pringles by like the box. So I ate like Pringles and cheesecake and chocolate chips. And I love chocolate, so I've never seen it like sold in sacks. So I'd like buy an entire bag of chocolate chips and like eat a freaking bag of chocolate chips a day straight, So that would do it.
So it was rice, beans, and chocolate chips.
Well, no, so chocolate chips were like the first year when I lived with my husband. So like when I was in medical school, I had no money for chocolate chips or anything. It was like straight rice and beans. That was it.
Okay. Chocolate chips were only in the dream.
Yeah, the chocolate chips, those times were behind, So, but you know what? My father sent me parcels. He sent me packages of chocolate. Now remember, he sent me parcels of porous chocolate. He sent me like 20 to 30 chocolates. Now remember, yes. So I had chocolate for breakfast.
Oh my God, that's so sweet. Like was sending you chocolate to America from Russia.
From Russia, yes. Yeah.
But at that point, things must have gotten a little bit better by that time. It was like, what, 2004?
Not so great for him. It was okay. Honestly, I can't speak for it because I was in the States and, probably my parents wouldn't tell me too much, or at least my father for sure. He's a stoic. But I know that for a while in the Soviet Union, at least at the times when I was leaving, he lost his job. So, he was living on 3 pieces of bread with Spam on it for like over a year, or margarine. That's all he had, and like tea. So he still has this the safe containers. So he still has like 40 containers from that margarine. So,
wow.
Yeah, I know, right? Graphic,
So with your mom, when you left, how did your relationship evolve?
So I think that my mom, first of all, I think my mom was extremely happy because, like I said, I think it was the goal of her life for me to leave Russia, just because, like I mentioned before, she had breast cancer when I was born. She didn't think she would live to my adulthood. And so she really wanted me to have all this opportunity. And I think she was just very relieved that that happened.
Let me ask you this 1 second. Just did both of you live with the fear that something could happen with her?
Well, I was her kid, so I still think my mom will never die. She's immortal for me. But she lived with the fear that she would, not survive, and that she would, she always felt like she was very unhealthy, and that because someone, like Russian doctors told her that, I think they told her that. I don't know what exactly they told her, but I know they told her enough for her to always, fear for her life, forever. And that's part of her anxiety and OCD and so forth. They also told her to not go, to never tan and never go to the ocean or the sea, which is a load of baloney. And she loved it. So they took away her one thing she loved, because they told her that, UV light and, will make her cancer come back, there's all these fairy tales, so.
Is that a fairy tale?
Yeah, actually, breast cancer is associated with low vitamin D levels. So if anything, you probably want to be more sun exposed, to get higher vitamin D levels. It's not causation, but there is, correlation in many cancers, and so anyhow, so yeah.
You're just blew my mind. Because my mom actually passed away from breast cancer. 13 years ago, and I grew up. The reason I'm asking you about if you had that fear is because I did grow up with that fear, because she was sick for a long time, and they did at one point tell me, they set us down. The doctors set us down. Back to Russian, culture. They set us down, and they literally told us, it was my dad, me, and my grandma, not my mom. She was not in the room. The doctor told us, your relative is doomed. That's what he said. That were his words. And I remember it made my dad so angry, and he said, we're all doomed.
Yeah.
There's no such thing. And he was just so insensitive, but that fear of that moment coming and then, it happening, of course, for me, instilled the fear for years. And I actually have been avoiding sun for years.
Oh gosh, no, don't do that.
Literally, I live in Los Angeles, but I live vampire life.
Yeah, no, you should go out and sunbathe. Skin cancer rarely kills anyone, and boosting up your vitamin D levels is good for your health on many levels,
Well, I'm getting into surfing because there's no more salsa in this COVID world, so I'm getting into surfing, so that should help with vitamin D, right?
Yeah, sunscreen, reasonable sunscreen, but but not you don't have to avoid sun altogether. So yeah.
Yes. Well, that I got some great medical advice out of this. That's great.
To the point where actually sunburn is the worst. I guess it has more of an impact when you're a kid, because when you're a kid, it's literally affecting your stem cells, right? Younger. So, to be getting sun in the older age is not quite as bad as getting sunburned as a kid.
Interesting.
Yeah. So now actually I sometimes go and intentionally get sunburned because I really like to feel the sunburned skin, because then I'm working, but I'm I went out and I'm sunburned, I feel the ocean, I know I had fun and it lasts a week, so it's I intentionally under sunscreen a little bit, not for the bubbles, but then a little bit, just a little bit of red, and that pleasant
That's so
sensation.
funny.
So
That's a funny thing. So I'm sorry. So I interrupted you. So we were talking about how your relationship with your mom evolved when
Well,
you
I think
left.
uh-huh. I think it got better because we lived in a communal apartment in one room. So it was extremely stressful because I was a teenager, and then a young adult, and it's stressful to live with anyone in just one small room, and sharing everything. So like I think that in many cases, especially with mothers, daughters, distance actually makes the relationship better because then you don't have this tension of sharing the same space and kitchen and whatever, but you just can talk on the phone about things that actually matter, not like dirty dishes or like with whom I spend the night, but life and death and things like that. So yeah, so to this day I would say that it's very good, and I'm actually think that if we stayed together there, it wouldn't have been good. Maybe I wouldn't, eventually I would like stop talking to my mom, but now we talk every day, so
That's
it's good.
amazing. That's so great. Do you think that her her disease made an impact on your choice of your specialty in the field?
Yeah, absolutely. So I became curious about oncology when I found out that my mom had breast cancer. And of course, initially it was almost like a quest, I'm going to
Oh shoot,
become a physician. And
we
I
got
thought that I would
disconnected.
go into breast
Hello?
cancer, into breast oncology. But I
Mm.
actually didn't
Oh,
enjoy breast cancer
Yulia,
clinics
Yulia.
very much. So it didn't really, uh-huh, yeah. Hmm.
We got disconnected like
Yep.
from the beginning of your
Okay.
answer. We got cut off. Can you repeat?
Okay. Okay. Yes. So my mom's breast cancer diagnosis definitely influenced my decision to become an oncologist, and I became curious about oncology when I learned and I realized that my mom had breast cancer. And of course, initially it was a quest to become a physician, and I was thinking that I would go into breast oncology, and potentially, of course, romantically thinking I would find a cure or contribute
And how
to
old were you?
being able to cure. Um, 16. So when I got into medical school,
Hmm.
that's when I kind of like solidified the fact that the knowledge that my mom had breast cancer, because she never
Mm.
openly told me that. Like I said, to this day, she's never told me I had breast cancer, right? So she only mentions it tangentially.
Hmm.
Um, so I think I told you the story about like our like moment when she in the United States. I'm not sure.
No, you didn't tell me
I'll
the
tell it
story. Tell
again.
me the story. No,
Okay,
no,
the
no, you
story
didn't
is
tell me.
that
Tell me the
I
story.
was already in the United States and she was visiting me. And so I remembered that back in the Soviet Union, once a year, she took me to this place to get a bra. And it was really odd because I was thinking, why would she be going to some special place to get a bra? Well, now I understand that she was allocated like probably two free bras a year from like a special, from a special supplier that were fit for breast prosthesis. So now I understand that. But back then, I just remember waiting there, like sitting there and waiting in the waiting room. And I think sometimes like my mom had to bring me with her. So I knew it had to do with bras and her, getting fit for a bra, but I didn't know what it was about. And so in the United States, when she was visiting, she's like, Yulia, I have to go get a bra because I don't have a bra for me. And I realized that she was kind of reaching out because she realized that I probably knew that she needed a special bra. And I'm like, okay. So I was very happy. I was like, okay, let's go to the store. Let's find a good bra for you, and so we went to just a general store, because they actually can use anyone and fit a prosthesis in. And so we found some bras for her and she let me, go into the dressing room with her. And like, she didn't say anything, but, she is like, she was letting me like fit that prosthesis into the bra. She was doing it in front of me. So she was like, for the first time ever, revealing that she didn't have one breast. And so she was putting that prosthesis into that new bra. And then I'm like, Mom, you have to put it this way, sideways, because she was pointing the little, like a breast has a tail, so like a little extension of a breast. So she was kind of pointing it upward. And I was like, oh, Mom, no, it points to the side. And she's like, no, 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 it should go this way. I'm like, no, no, Mom, it points to the side. Like, that's the brain anatomy. Oh, sorry, breast anatomy. And then she was like, "Oh, that's why it never fit. That's not why it never looked right." So, and it's like I realized that for like 20 plus years, they never fit that prosthetic, breast into the bra correctly. And so it always looked weird, you know? And I was the first person to fit it, and put it in anatomically in a correct way, and it was kind of like a beautiful moment, but at the same time, for me, like very, very heartbreaking because I realized just how lonely she was in that, breast cancer mastectomy world.
Wow. But it's amazing that you got to have that moment with her, and um even though I'm gathering that there was no conversation about it.
Yeah, so yeah, it's still like, never a direct conversation. I think she was so scared all her life that she's never even said the word cancer in Russian. Never. She always calls it like kansera in Russian, like a Latin word or like some pseudo English word. Because I think like that, like I think they just told her some terrible things. Like I think she was told that she would not live to my, third year
Yeah.
birthday or something.
Yeah. Wow. Your mom is a hero.
She really is.
Miracle.
So, what was the biggest thing you got out of this transition for you?
I think that just moving closer to becoming a person of the world. Once you move, you probably never acquire a true home. And that opens your mind, that opens your mind to travels, that opens your mind to new cultures, to being flexible and understanding. That's where I am, because I'm not stuck in my ways. So, I can adapt very easily to different ways. Again, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue to be like that. A lot of times when you're older, you revert to being pretty conservative. But at least now I'm just so happy with all these experiences that I have. Learning Spanish alone and then traveling all over, eventually all over Central and South America. It's just beautiful. So I don't think that I would have been able to do all those travels and learn about all those cultures, and I wouldn't have been able to meet these thousands of people that I have met if I didn't leave Russia. I'm still friends with my friends from Russia. I'm still friends with my friends whom I know from the age of 6. And now we'll reconvene with this ecstatic joy, of having gone through all this. My story is not unique. So many people went through this and just being so happy with what we have, and now just coming back to simplicity because I acquired wisdom, so, remember in Greek mythology, I never understood why they punished people with exile. I always thought, what a strange punishment. Isn't it fun to travel? Why is the exile a punishment? But then really in my first year in the States, for second year, I felt like that punished exiled Greek. I felt horrible and I knew there was no return. And I frequently thought of that. And I frequently thought of my new understanding of the most severe ancient Greek punishment. But then I also understand that through these travels, you acquire wisdom, which is another theme in Greek mythology and, in the Odyssey and the Iliad and all the struggles. And so here I am,
Well, in mythology, the hero usually makes the way back too.
Well, I think the way back is a lot of times when they make their way back is like some kind of mess, they marry like their mom, or kill their dad or, some other weird thing, as you remember, or get killed like Jason by the prow of their ship, So that's, I think you don't come back. That's the thing. Don't come back and try to, reestablish yourself. It's not going to happen, So
I like it. I love it.
I learned better, so no, I'm not coming back for my Eurydice, I'm not coming back for my old loves. No, I'm very happy with just understanding that I don't need stuff at all. Back then I really so coveted the stuff because I felt like that was the symbol of success. And now I realize that actually not at all. I want to dump all my stuff. I wish I could now have kids, So I'm planning in my head how I'm going to get rid of all this stuff eventually and be free, have as little as possible of material possessions and, continue my life, being content. And I have a luxury. So I'm very grateful because I have financial comfort and I have the peace of mind, partial peace of mind. So now I have a luxury of thinking about not just people, but also our planet and doing some work for it. So I think that's the continuation.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about. I was looking up things and two things jumped at me: monarch butterfly and bats. Tell me about this.
Yeah, my background is biology, and my bachelor's degree is in biology. To this day, I pride myself in being a biologist and having good biology knowledge. And so, even in my childhood, I was shocked by the destruction of the planet. I mean, I remember that from the age of 5. I remember reading about the Red Book, and the endangered species list, and being very sad about that, understanding that deeply. So now, because I have a luxury of financial comfort and profession where I can go to work and be happy because I'm going to do something good every day, I can think about other creatures. I chose a couple of things that I can do. One is helping the monarch butterflies who are becoming extinct. Mm-hmm. So in California, we planted the monarch garden, the milkweed garden, for their breeding, which was quite successful. We had a lot of caterpillars and generations of monarch. And here in Florida, we already planted milkweed as well. And so I'm just trying to promote the cause, like, telling little kids at schools about the monarchs, and just even posting it on Facebook, for people to know.
I'm all about that. Like, what do you do?
Very easy. So whenever you have a chance to have a garden, make sure to plant native plants that are nectar plants, so that butterflies have feeder plants, also bees, and also some milkweed. Native milkweed is better because monarch caterpillars only feed on and lay their eggs on milkweed. And so that way, monarchs will have more of a habitat and will have a chance for recovery. Because unfortunately, of course, we destroyed most of the wild milkweed population, and consequently monarch. So monarch is very special, because what happens is that it migrates from the north of the United States all the way to Mexico, but it doesn't migrate as one butterfly. It migrates to the next state, lays eggs, becomes caterpillar, then next butterfly, and so forth. But then the very last generation of the butterflies that flies to Mexico is different. It's a butterfly that lives, I can't say precisely, but about 10 times longer than the previous ones, and is very strong. So it flies across the ocean to Mexico. So, and it's the same genetic creature. So imagine what a mystery.
How is that possible?
Epigenetics, right? So same DNA, but different genes are open and closed. So imagine if we knew these genes. I mean, imagine the knowledge of that creature could help us maybe create superhumans who would go to Mars, and I'm a biologist, so I'm saying it is not impossible. So it's crucial to save these creatures because they carry a great mystery of existence. So that's why I'm a big fan, and, I try to promote their cause.
Thank you for telling me about this. I'm really excited about this. This is interesting. There was in Los Angeles a month ago, around Halloween, there was the Day of the Dead, and which is celebrated widely in Los Angeles. Did people celebrate it in Miami?
I don't know yet. I don't think that much, because we don't have too many people from Mexico.
Right. It's more Cuban, right?
Yeah, more Cuban.
Right. So here, Day of the Dead is big, as you know. And this year at Hollywood Forever, the cemetery, they did Day of the Dead, but it was connected with the immigrant issue. And monarch butterflies were a theme. Girls dressed as butterflies, and, they went all out. It's so beautiful. And my plan is next year totally to turn into a monarch.
Yep, and now you know the story, so they're very special.
Now I know the story. Yeah, now I understand why. Because I knew they migrated, but I didn't know that. First of all, I didn't realize that it's not one butterfly migrating. It's actually a dynasty moving back and forth, which is crazy. What makes them go?
That we don't know. I mean, likely. I mean, at least for the compass, it's likely electromagnetic field. Like in birds and maybe butterflies, they have the special proteins that actually like orient themselves according to electromagnetic field of the earth, and that's how they know the direction. It's kind of crazy. So it's like they have literally built-in compass,
right?
So that like makes them go. Maybe also like some kind of like temperature gradient, maybe some smells. I don't know.
Because I remember like in Russia, we get the birds who come for the winter, or the birds who leave for the winter. So that it has to do with the climate. So I was wondering if that's a similar thing with the monarch butterflies.
Yeah. So they probably sense like the climate, maybe the pollen concentration. So who knows, the angle of the sun.
Wow. So cool. All right. So tell me about the bats now.
I like to, I guess, take under my wing the creatures most ignored and hated. And so I don't even remember how it started with bats. I think that actually my life partner, Scott, read about the bats and we started talking and researching them. Maybe we watched a documentary and we're like, oh my gosh, they're amazing creatures. And then we bought a book by a bat researcher. His name is, don't remember the first name. His last name is Tuttle. And he is so cool. He is like a real Batman. Like since his little young age, he loved bats. And like in high school, he actually did bat research that was like accepted as some kind of like university thesis, and so as a high school kid. And so I read his book about bats and I just realized just how essential they were to our world. Like the most numerous mammals. I don't know if you knew, but they're the most numerous species of mammals. They have one pup at a time. They live for decades. And they're actually more related to dogs than they are related to mice. So they're not flying mice. They're exceptionally smart, all the senses, the echolocation, of course, and the ability to maneuver in the air is tremendous. So again, they have this huge biological mystery of being able to be so agile. And they just They're pollinators, they're seed dispersers. One bat eats at least, I think it's a pound of insects a year, at least. So the natural pest control. And people have all these stupid misconceptions about them, so I thought that I would pick up the cause of bats and promote it. So we became members of the Bat Conservation Society, and we donate to them. And, I went to like kids school and talked about bats. So we had all the fact reveal, and all this, things that are misconceptions debunked. So that's my bat call.
That's so cool.
Plus they're awfully cute. There's some bats that are so cute. So
I looked them up, and I certainly they're not as cute as koalas.
Well, but no, look up Ectophila alba. It's a white bat from Puerto Rico. So Ectophila alba, this is very cute.
Okay, I'll start with that. So, okay, now we figured out what bats and butterflies contribute. Going back to humans, there's a lot of negative talk about immigrants and immigration issue. Do you have a feeling that with all that, something has changed for you?
So no, I don't think anything changed for me. Luckily, with the immigration issues, I'm very lucky, I have to say, in some perverted way, to not be a person of color. So I blend in. American people have always been more curious about Russians. I've never encountered any animosity whatsoever. Even in the southern United States, I really never encountered animosity. My life partner probably would say because I'm a cute girl,
Likely contributes to that.
Yeah, but that's what he says. He's like, Yuliya, your whole life experience is completely different from even my life experience as a white American male, so who am I to say anything? So not really, but, I'm just very proud, to represent immigrants, because I think that my story is just part of millions of stories, and I love to share it because most people come here with the similar aspirations to mine. They don't come here to fail. They come here to succeed. And success can be defined in different ways. For some people, success is supporting their family. For other people, it's success of just having a stable life and having stuff, having the TV and the toaster and whatever, a clean apartment. For other people, the success is having their kids being at a safe place. But we all come here for a better life. And I think most of us work very hard towards it.
What do you think is the biggest thing that you personally contribute being an immigrant?
Well, I think that I'm very happy that, first of all, I was able to live my professional dream. I am a physician, and here I'm able to practice medicine at its best. I am able to use all my scientific knowledge and have all the resources, and I use them joyfully because I know that at many places and back in Russia, we don't have those resources. I'm happy to be a physician, a healer in this society, but also as an immigrant, I understand my immigrant patients so much better. So, for example, there's such notion as a difficult patient, and a lot of times it's job interviews, resident interviews. I was asked, how do you approach a difficult patient? And I always said, there's no such as a thing as a difficult patient for me. And it's really true. I'm not lying. There's no difficult patient. All the difficulty the doctor may have.
What people mean when they say difficult patient?
Well, so sometimes, some patients are demanding. Other patients don't follow recommendations or are inconsistent. Others maybe, are very probing, potentially litigious. But I really just approach everyone with an open heart, and I just try to understand why they appear to be difficult. I don't even treat it as a difficult patient. Like I said, I'm an oncologist. My patients have cancer, so I never, ever allow myself to think there's anything wrong with them, they're difficult or whatever. So I always try to understand where they come from, why they are the way they are, and try to, besides cancer, to see whether I can reach out to their past and maybe heal and remedy what's causing their present anxiety that's manifested by the facade of maybe appearing difficult. And definitely immigrant patients, Spanish-speaking patients, we speak the same language. It was so beautiful when I had these patients who came to me for a second opinion, and they ended up staying with me. And I said, well, that other place is amazing. Why didn't you stay with them? Or, I said, you don't have to be with me. And they were Spanish speaking, and they said, they looked in my eyes and they said, doctor, we speak the same language and we understand you, and that was just so beautiful. And then in Los Angeles, I took care of a lot of older Russian patients. I would say maybe 25% of my patients were Russian pensioners. And that was beautiful because, again, they came to me. They didn't have too many other doctors who could help them. And I could understand they would be described as extremely difficult. Come on, Russian patients have their own opinion. They bring, their own and their spouse's meds, and they just take whatever whenever they feel like it. They have their own opinions about the causes of everything, but I understand that, again. And I never had issues with them. My immigrant experience definitely contributes to being a better physician, for immigrants, but not only for immigrants, for American people as well, because they say, well, it's all about immigrants. What about the people who are from here? Well, the same way, same way I try to understand them and relate to them. And I lived at so many places in the US, and I love my American patients. We have a ton in common. When I'm with them, I'm a girl from North Carolina. I'm a girl from DC. I lived in Washington, DC, or a LA girl, whatever I am, I can relate to them.
You're a girl from all over the world. You connect with everyone. I think it's beautiful that you've acquired that ability. I agree with you very much that it is that immigrant experience of being an alien, being exiled, that forces you to get out of your head and try to connect with everybody on a human level. And I think that's the most beautiful thing there is, honestly, in the world. So what do you think people should know about Russia that people don't know?
Well, let's say modern Russia. I think they should know that Russia is not this scary place. Even I myself, honestly, was brainwashed by American media that Russia is just this kind of, I was envisioning like being arrested for nothing at the customs and, maybe getting a food poisoning somewhere and, maybe, I don't know, getting mugged or something. And mostly political things, I guess. I was like kind of concerned, I thought that maybe there was like some presence of like Putin's militia, or I don't even know what. I have no right to say, just all rumors, all from press and it's falsehood. Of course, there are a lot of political issues in Russia, but I went back to Russia. It was amazing. Customs were like, they were the nicest people in the world, didn't give me any trouble. All my life partner, American life partner, and people are just so sweet. They're so soft spoken and pleasant and polite and well behaved in general. The food is good. It's just a wonderful place. I mean, it's not scary and it's not much different from any other Eastern European country, maybe Czech Republic or Hungary. I mean, it's different. It's a different country, but still it's peaceful, beautiful, cultured, safe. And, we just should stop treating Russia like something like so alien and different, And we also have very similar history, like the history of depression here in the United States is very similar to the crisis we had to live through. If you dig into how we lived, we lived similarly. Like my life partner is American, and it's like we had similar childhoods. We have differences, but those differences are very superficial. In general, we're just people, very similar. And I think at both places, all people want is just to love. They just want to love and have friends. And Russian people are no different.
True. So, any lingering thoughts?
Well, just
I can see you're getting emotional now again. Is it what is it?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about Russia. I do miss it. Like thinking about my friends and like you made me remember all the little moments there. So I get emotional thinking about them.
It's interesting that you said love. That thing about like wanting love and wanting happiness. I don't know. We talked about suffering, right? I felt like Russians never search for happiness.
Yeah, that's true. But I think search for happiness also doesn't necessarily make you happy, because then you're like always searching for something else. Like in American culture, and now it's penetrating the Russian culture, they're always like showing this perfectly happy house with this perfectly healthy, smiling kids and mom, and it's all like ideal. And she's like spraying some toxic chemical on the counter to disinfect it, And then like people think that's how it should be and that's happiness. And then like it actually makes you miserable because it's never like that. The kids are always screaming. Kitchen is never that clean, and the relationship is never without rough edges. So I think that search for happiness is cool. It's like it's a good place to start at. But then when you realize that, like, just stop searching. The miracle of existence, man. That's what it is. Just be. So it's good to search. But through all this travel, it's like I'm just grateful for just being. And actually, that was one of those beautiful things I realized when I went back to St. Petersburg this past summer. I came there and I was so happy with my friends. I barely slept, ate whatever, just like basic foods, didn't care for any fancy restaurants or anything. All I had was just my friends' love, and lived a very basic Airbnb, like not that comfortable.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? Like now I know that like I always have a place, I always have a place like where I'm just loved and like I would be happy. It was just as like some place to sleep. Like I will need a bed. That I will need a bed. That's it. But the rest just doesn't really matter at all,
So in a way, you did make your comeback as a Greek hero.
Yeah, I guess in a way I did. I didn't stay there because
Okay.
I think that because it would probably like crash and burn again. But but at least I have that place in my heart, and it's just giving me a lot of peace. I mean, I would need a couple of other things like a library. So yeah, so I think just the beauty of existing, the beauty of things around you, is probably sufficient after a certain journey.
So you managed to make peace with it for that home and that beautiful place to be out there.
Yes, out there, because I realized that I'm still important to my friends there, because like I said, they were always such a huge part of my life, and just knowing that they are still my brothers and sisters and I'm relevant there. I guess it's that sensation of being relevant to your homeland, that there is someone there caring about you was important, as it may be equally important for them to know I care about them. Like I have a lot of people who live vicariously through what I have here and Facebook and all that. And I think it gives them a lot of joy, versus it gives me a lot of joy to see their pictures of the morning dew at their dacha, like some pot of homemade preserves. That gives me that beautiful connection and continuity.
Yeah. All right. The last question. What advice would you give to, you can choose either yourself or somebody who's coming to the States now?
I think, again, this is more of advice that comes from my grand age of 42 now. Is that what I didn't realize is that time fixes a lot of things, probably even if I stayed in Russia and I didn't come to the States, within 20 years of living there, I would have been okay, and that's what my parents did not teach me, because like I said, they taught us to envy and want everything now. As a young person, you just want everything now. And because you don't have everything now, you don't have that fancy car right now, or you don't have that apartment or house, you're like miserable. And it feels like you'll never have it. But I was like, if you work hard, and if you're true to what you love, love money, you're true to like making that money, you love medicine, you're true to becoming an amazing doctor, love sweeping floors and cleanliness, and you are doing that, with great zeal and conscientiously, you are going to be okay. That's my advice. You're going to be fine, and be true to yourself. And if working hard is not being true to yourself, you are already okay, probably. So,
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, all right. Thank you, Sasha.
This is beautiful. Really, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
That's it for today. Tune in on Thursday. Subscribe, review, follow, share, comment, repost. Do something. Do the thing. And remember, we're here to stay. We'll find our way. Thank you for listening. Love y'all.
My country, you can keep the rest. This is my country, my damn country, and it don't mean a thing.